Thomas Mark Harmon was born into a world where fame was not just a distant possibility, but a living, breathing presence in the everyday fabric of his family. To understand the private man who would one day embody one of television's most famously silent characters, you must first look at the family table where he was raised. Born on September 2nd, 1951, in Burbank, California, Mark was the youngest child of Tom Harmon and Elise Knox. His father was not merely a former athlete. He was a Heisman Trophy winner, a decorated World War II pilot who had survived being shot down, and a celebrated broadcaster. His mother was an actress and model who had carved her own space in the golden era of Hollywood. This upbringing placed him squarely within a world of public scrutiny, but more importantly, it taught him the value of restraint and the burden of a legacy. The extended family tree reads like a who's who of mid-century Americana. His sister Kristen married rock and roll star Ricky Nelson, while his other sister, Kelly, was married to car magnate John DeLorean. This environment cultivated a unique perspective. He was close enough to celebrity to see its machinery and its cost, yet he learned early that the safest way to navigate such a world was to build a wall between the public persona and the private self. One small anecdote reveals the tone of this upbringing. When Mark became the starting quarterback for UCLA, his own father, Tom, served as the play-by-play announcer. So determined was Tom to avoid any appearance of bias that he refused to say his son's name on air, instead referring to him simply as the quarterback. It was a masterclass in emotional discipline, a lesson in keeping the spotlight firmly at arm's length that Mark Harmon would internalize and carry with him for the rest of his life. Before he became a television icon, Mark Harmon was a competitor on the gridiron. Football was his first love and his first proving ground. He was a three-sport star in high school, but a broken elbow and a lack of major recruitment led him down a less traveled path. He took a detour through Pierce Junior College, where he played quarterback and earned junior college All-America honors. His performances there finally opened doors to major programs. Oklahoma came calling, a powerhouse that had finished second in the nation in 1971, while UCLA was coming off a 2-7-1 season. In a decision that foreshadowed his later career choices, Harmon eschewed the obvious narrative and chose the challenge of rebuilding UCLA. It was a clear signal of his character. He would rather earn something on his terms than accept a gift on someone else's. The decision paid off spectacularly. In his first game as the Bruins' starting quarterback, he led a massive upset over the two-time defending national champion Nebraska Cornhuskers, ending their 32-game winning streak. Over 2 seasons, the Bruins compiled a 17-5 record under his leadership, and he graduated with a degree in communications. Yet, a professional football career wasn't waiting for him. The NFL draft passed him by. For many, this might have been a devastating end, a story of dreams cut short. For Harmon, it was merely a pivot. He moved into the business world, working as a merchandising director, but he soon realized that the corporate path, while safe, wasn't his. Without an agent or a plan, he decided to take a chance on acting. It was a risky move, a step into the unknown, but it followed the pattern he had already established. When the path ahead no longer felt true, he walked away to find a new one. Mark Harmon did not arrive in Hollywood with an immediate success story. He entered the industry through the workmanlike process of guest spots and small roles. A pivotal connection came through his sister Kristen's in-laws, Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, who gave him a role on their show Ozzie's Girls, which set him on a new course. Throughout the late 1970s, he built a resume of appearances on shows like Emergency, Laverne and Shirley, and Policewoman. It was a slow, steady climb, but by 1983, he landed the role that would make him a recognizable face. Dr. Robert Caldwell on the groundbreaking medical drama St. Elsewhere. His character's contract with HIV through a heterosexual relationship was a monumental storyline, confronting the AIDS crisis head-on when many shows were still too afraid to touch it. Then came the strange collision of public image and personal choice. In January 1986, he was named People magazine's Sexiest Man Alive. It was a label that could have typecast him forever, locking him into roles as a charming, safe leading man. Instead, that same year, he chose to play the role of the real-life serial killer Ted Bundy in The Deliberate Stranger. It was a deliberate and powerful act of defiance. At the exact moment the culture wanted to put him in a neat, clean box, he chose to explore the darkest corners of humanity. He complicated his image, proving he was a serious actor willing to take risks rather than a matinee idol who coasted on his looks. That choice became a hallmark of his career. He resisted being defined by the simplest label, always looking to deepen the story. At the height of his fame, Mark Harmon quietly built a marriage that would become one of the most enduring in Hollywood, a testament to his belief in privacy. He married actress Pam Dauber on March 21, 1987. They were both at the peaks of their careers, he a rising movie star, she the star of Mork and Mindy, but they decided early on that their relationship would not be fodder for the media. They drew a line. Dauber later said that if you don't want a relationship consumed by the press, you have to protect it. And they did exactly that. They built a family life centered around their two sons, Sean and Ty, and they guarded it fiercely. Harmon was committed to being present. He famously turned down movie roles that required extensive travel because he didn't want to miss his children growing up. One of the key reasons he eventually signed on to NCIS was that it filmed in Los Angeles, allowing him to be home with his family, a practical choice that underscored his values. For Mark Harmon, privacy wasn't a passive trait. It was an active construction, a fortification he built around the things he valued most. This instinct to protect and to perform often leads to the most human moments. Nowhere is this more evident than in the story of his most heroic act, which also reveals his deepest humility. On January 3, 1996, a car carrying two teenage boys crashed near his Brentwood home, flipping over and bursting into flames. The driver escaped, but the passenger, Colin Specht, was trapped in the inferno. Pam Dauber was the first on the scene and shouted for her husband to bring a sledgehammer. Harmon ran out, smashed the window, and pulled the terrified, burning teenager from the wreckage. The rescue was dramatic, a scene ripped from a movie, but it was Harmon's response afterward that spoke volumes. He pushed back on the word hero, calling it a stupid thing to do because of the danger. He pointed out the risk, noting that by breaking the window, he fed the fire more oxygen, making the explosion worse. He refused to turn it into a legend about himself. He didn't want to be defined by one act of courage, no matter how profound. Colin Specht, who suffered severe burns and spent months in the hospital, never forgot what Harmon did for him. He had more to lose than most people would at that point, Specht said, reflecting on the actor's career and family. I owe everything to him, he said. But Harmon's consistent humility was a shield. He spoke of the rescue in practical terms, reflecting on the danger, not his bravery. This moment is the emotional center of his story because it proves his actions were genuine. He didn't seek attention, he moved toward need, and then stepped away from the applause. The fire, the glass, and the credit, he wouldn't take it. It was a lived example of the pattern he'd always followed. Do what needs to be done, and then disappear from the spotlight before it can consume you. If the car explodes and I'm there next to the car, he said, then you're talking about two young boys who don't have a father. He wasn't an angel, Specht said, because an angel has no sense of mortality. Harmon was a man, a husband, and a father who made a choice. When Leroy Jethro Gibbs appeared on television screens, it was the culmination of a lifetime of discipline. The character was not a loud, bombastic hero. He was a quiet, observant leader who communicated with a look or a pause. The role, which Harmon took on in 2003 after a guest stint on JAG, fit the actor like a glove. The character's silence was active, and Harmon understood this intuitively. He commanded a scene by holding back, by making his stillness feel like power, often leading writers to cut his dialogue because he could land a moment with an expression. Harmon's influence grew beyond the acting. He became an executive producer in 2008, and his authority on set shaped the show's tone. For nearly 2 decades, he was the linchpin of one of the most watched shows in the world, a man who carried a franchise on his stoic shoulders. But the weight of that was immense. Harmon later spoke of the grueling hours, recalling that his first day on set lasted 22 hours. The exhaustion was a constant companion. He had taken the job originally to stay close to his family, but the daily grind of the show was punishing. The decision to leave wasn't a whim, it had been discussed for years. Finally, in the fourth episode of season 19, The Great Wide Open, Gibbs decided to stay in Alaska after a case, finding peace in the wilderness. It was a quiet, reflective ending. Harmon said the decision was about timing, about keeping the character fresh and honest, and not wanting to let the role fully define him. He stepped away while the choice was still his, showing the ultimate form of control. However, the story of Mark Harmon cannot be told without acknowledging the conflict that became part of his public narrative, a painful chapter that punctured his carefully guarded privacy. This involves his co-star, Paulie Parrott. In 2016, a crew member was bitten by Harmon's dog on set, requiring stitches. Reports later surfaced that Parrott was uncomfortable with the dog being brought back to the set, leading to a major rift between the two actors. Scripts were allegedly written so they would never have to share a scene, filming their final joint appearance through editing. When Parrott left the show in 2018, she took to social media to imply she had been silenced, stating she had to protect her crew from a machine, leaving fans to read between the lines. A full public record of the events remains incomplete, with the truth obscured by he said, she said, and PR statements. CBS said they addressed the concerns. Many other cast members described Harmon as a steady professional and a mentor, painting a very different picture. The conflict, however, does more than just create a mystery. It is a stark reminder that, even for someone as private as Harmon, control is an illusion. He spent years building walls to protect his reputation, but this painful chapter escaped them. It shows that a person can be deeply respected by many and still be part of a situation that causes deep hurt to others. It adds complexity to the character of the man, showing that his reserve and authority could be interpreted differently depending on who is experiencing them. It reveals that the man who could save a life from a burning car could also be part of a less-than-heroic story in the workplace. The final chapter is one of continuation, not disappearance. Harmon has made it clear he left the show, he didn't retire. He co-wrote Ghosts of Honolulu, a historical book on espionage, and took on a new role in the franchise as the narrator and executive producer of NCIS. Origins, a prequel series that explores the younger years of Gibbs, who is now played by actor Austin Stoll. In a full-circle moment, he even returned for a brief cameo as the older Gibbs in a crossover event, proving the door is never fully locked. He moved forward, but he moved forward on his own terms. The sentence was not a punishment, it was a choice. Mark Harmon walked away because he had always walked away. He walked away from the safe bet at Oklahoma. He walked away from the corporate grind. He walked away from the Hollywood spotlight that threatened to define him. He walked away from a role that could have held him forever. He was never interested in living as a public possession. He built his life on deciding what he would give, what he would protect, and crucially, when he would leave. Even when he made the monumental decision to walk away, he did so with the quiet assurance that defined his life. He left not because he was forced out, but because his work was done and the choice was his alone. That is the final truth about Mark Harmon. He was the one who held the hammer.